Not yet. There's always a 20-second delay or so.
Although I don't know that my one concern, if I go live on here while you are live, are we going to pull too much bandwidth that'll chop up your?
Starlink? I would hope it's fine.
And mine is far enough away
See it
that
now?
we can see everybody.
So no image yet. There's one person waiting.
That person you.
No, it doesn't show you normally. But yeah, is it showing that it's recording on?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Says live.
Is that spelled right?
Almost a minute now.
Okay. In that case,
I mean, it's entirely possible that I've done something.
oh, there we go. Yeah. So you can
Well,
actually move the camera in closer because we see like. In that case. Because you only need to see from here to the third chair. So.
I mean, it's entirely possible that I've done something.
Oh, there. And closer because we see like. In that case. That's good. You only need to see from here to the third chair. Yeah. That's good. You only need to see from here. Turn the volume down, and you're going live on TikTok, or
Yeah, and I'm just saying YouTube at Wander Lounge.
So if they want to leave comments,
Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
going to see any comments on TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the comments coming through on TikTok. The goal is that they see the note on the screen
Yeah.
and then come over and interact there. So guys, if you're joining the live here, come over to YouTube instead on the Wander Lounge YouTube channel. We're going to be answering questions there. It does show lost connection, so we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
Can't find the YouTube name.
Can't find the YouTube name. Wander Lounge. Oh, that's it. YouTube.com/C/Wander Lounge will take you right there.
Well, let's focus on yours and they can figure it out.
Yep.
The priority is yours. How do we look, Ivan? Are we beautiful?
Not yet because there's a
He's got a delay.
there's a 30-second delay here.
I'm getting ripped. Yeah. Yeah. Which one is it? This one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stage right?
Okay, we're good. We're live.
I need my list.
I have the list.
Well, you have his list.
Oh, you have your list.
Yeah, he has my list.
Okay.
I should have sent you both my list. But that's okay. Maybe you'll send.
Yeah.
my list.
Where would you like it sent?
Send it to Ryan.
No, but Messenger or
Oh. Send it to you on Messenger.
Yeah, that'll work. And then I'll just copy it and put it in my notes once my notes app updates and syncs with my phone, which has my other stuff.
Yeah. All right, so we are getting ready to start here. So today we are talking about the 10 worst things about living in a bus.
your phone keeps focusing in and out.
I don't know why.
Okay.
All right, so today we're talking about the 10 worst things about living in a bus. And we have a lot of years of experience between us here. I have a schoolie that I built that I've been living full-time in for about 7.5 years. This is my friend Ryan. You'd like to introduce yourself?
As Josh said, I'm Ryan from CK3. I have a 2005 Bluebird bus, and I've been on the road for over 2.5 years now.
And I'm Ivan from the LaCroix Cruiser, and we've been part-time. Well, we were part-time for 2 years and full-time for a little over 5 years now, so 7.5 years total.
Yes. It's fair to say that anything negative about living in a bus we have experienced either personally or in the groups we travel in. Before we get too deep into it, this isn't a list of 10 things that are going to make you not want to get a bus. These are things that you need to be aware of and plan for as you are making the journey into schooling life or coach life or van life.
Nomad life. We'll put it that way.
Nomad life.
Yeah.
Nomad on wheels life.
So just like, when we say he or her or him or whatever, same thing. When we say schoolie, it can mean an ambulance, it can mean a van, it can mean a tent, it can mean a coach, it can mean a schoolie, it can mean a whatever, a box truck. Schoolie is just the general term.
Yeah, it's an inclusive.
Yes,
exactly. All right, so we all have our own lists, and there are going to be overlaps here between them. So I'm going to start off with my personal number one worst thing about living in a schoolie, and that is the cost, mostly around the price of fuel. When I started into my schoolie build, diesel was actually cheaper than gasoline. And diesel to manufacture is still cheaper than gasoline. However, our friendly government has decided that our diesel fuel needed to have a lot of additional taxes put on it. So now diesel is more expensive than gasoline pretty much all the time. When you're driving a schoolie, you pretty much can expect you're going to get anywhere between 10 miles per gallon. If you have something like this, maybe you're going to get a little worse than that, but you're not really ever going to get better than that. So you have to kind of figure in with the cost of diesel the way it is right now. If you're going to be traveling, you're going to be spending about 50 cents a mile while you're going down the road. And that's just for fuel. That doesn't cover your maintenance. That doesn't cover your insurance. It's not going to cover tire replacements, things like that. It's just to have you rolling down the road with your bus otherwise. So while there are a lot of opportunities to save money with your lifestyle when you're doing the nomadic thing, you definitely need to be able to plan to afford that fuel.
Yeah. For myself, I'm probably the one that travels the most in terms of mileage here. We do 40 to 50,000 miles a year. Fuel is definitely a big cost. But on the other hand, if you're living in a house, you have to heat that house. You have to pay taxes for that house. You have to maintain the house, et cetera, et cetera. The cost of ownership and the cost of living in a bus for me is actually less than it was in a house, despite the 40,000 miles a year.
Yeah, same here for sure.
Well, in the realm of fuel, one of the nice things is we really have full control over how much we want to budget or expend in terms of fuel by how much we travel.
Right. Yeah. Drive less if you don't have the money to pay for it.
Exactly. So one other kind of thing to consider with the 50 cents ish per mile is also if your work requires you to travel and you can get any kind of mileage reimbursement. And how does that play out with the cost of fuel? Do you come out ahead or behind, or at least recoup some of the money? So take that into consideration too, if you can have it be a work-related expense or not.
What are they giving out? 53 cents a mile?
65 cents a mile.
Cents a mile in tax break for that, if you're able to claim those miles as a work-related expense.
Number two.
All right, so my number two is getting attention from people when you don't want it. One thing about schoolies is they don't hide very well, and they do attract a lot of attention. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were in a parking lot having lunch, and some random person in a truck started doing laps around the bus, just eyeballing us, like not being malicious or anything, but we weren't ready to show the bus or have conversations about the bus. We were just trying to stop and have lunch while we were traveling across Florida. And it was an interesting interaction because the guy did several laps, and my wife was working on something in the bedroom and seeing him out the window, and he eventually just kind of stopped there, and she yelled hi to him, and he had a white paper bag and lifted it up and said, "Would you like some hamburgers?" Well, interested in you, and you're not always going to be in the mood for that. But sometimes you will.
Yeah, I've had some weird encounters as well. Went to a Walmart once, and I just felt like I was being watched. And come out, load my stuff into the bus, lock my door to go put the cart back. And when I came back to my bus, there was a guy that came to approach me, and he's like, "Oh, I actually work here. I'm on my break. I saw your bus. I wanted to come say hi." So it turned into a fine encounter, but it was a little off-putting in the beginning, especially as a solo traveler, that sometimes people do approach you when you don't want that attention.
Yeah.
For us, we probably have the most stealth vehicle in this group. Even though it's 45 feet long and it's huge, people assume if we park somewhere, they assume we belong there. And because it looks like this expensive thing, which actually it isn't, but anyways, people tend to leave us alone. So we have that. But yes, when we're getting gas, we have the truckers asking us like, "Oh, what's in there?" And they're asking more about the engine than the rest of the bus, though.
Yeah, and that's kind of a point where maybe if you're in a converted van, you're not really going to have that problem. You have other problems, but you won't really have the problem of people saying, "Oh my God, what is that? It's amazing. I need to go up and ask a million questions."
Number three.
Number three, difficulty of finding resources on the road, including water, places to park, and having to do potentially a lot of planning before you go somewhere. Now, this is something that you definitely, like, you put a little effort into it and it's not going to be a problem. But if you don't put effort into it, it probably will be. When you have a school bus, like, you can't just park at McDonald's. You can't just arbitrarily pull into a random parking lot. Like, I want to get Mexican food, and I'm just going to go to whatever parking lot the Mexican restaurant happens to have, and we're just going to fit. You need to be using tools like I use Google Maps quite a bit. And when we see somewhere that we want to go, we look at their parking lot. If it's not big enough, we look at the one next to it on either side across the street. If we're going to Walmart it that night, we're just going to park in their parking lot. We're going to use Google Maps to look at the parking lot, make sure it's big enough, make sure there are, you can actually look in the satellite images will show if there are RVs that happen to be parked there when they were taking their images. And if there were, then it's pretty safe that you'll be able to get in, get out, and nobody's going to disturb you. As far as water goes, if you are apprehensive about things like asking a gas station attendant if you can use their spigot, you need to get over that. That's going to be one of the common ways that you'll be able to get water. Truck stops a lot of the time will have a fill and a dump that's available that you can use. But you definitely need to have an idea of how much water you have in your tank, where you could be able to get water from next. And you definitely don't want to run out of water while you're on the road.
No, for us, we mostly get water at truck stops. We have 125 gallons of water and 135 of waste. So when one is dumping, we fill the other. Life is good. And it costs $10 every 2 weeks, so it's not that big of an expense either.
Yeah, and typically if I'm out on the road and I need to find a place, state parks can usually do $10 to dump and fill, and they're easy in and out and all over the place. So still cheaper than living in a sticks and bricks having that utility bill.
Yep.
When you mentioned kind of having to plan a lot on the road, I think I'm the opposite of that. So I typically don't plan a lot of what I'm doing. I'm more of a kind of wing it and sporadic. Some of the resources that I really like is Boondockers Welcome and Harvest Host. And I always look for people who do same day bookings. So if I have a general idea of what direction I'm headed, I can go into that app, request a place to stay. And usually within an hour or two, I know if it's approved. So I tend to wing it a little bit more, but I also pay for the convenience through those programs.
Yeah, and we also use HipCamp, but Boondockers Welcome, Harvest Host, which same company now. They're the ones we use the most. Walmart, as Josh mentioned, and there's an app called All Stays that allows you to see which Walmarts you can and can't park at, and they give general indications as to where in the lot you want to park, things like that.
Yeah, the kind of the golden rule is you want to park as far away from the store as possible.
Yeah.
So that you're out of the way. You don't want to be a burden to them while you're taking advantage of their large parking lots.
Do your groceries there.
Yeah, do your groceries there. Like when we go to a Walmart, we stock up on supplies in the morning or in the evening before we go to bed. They used to be, most Walmarts used to be 24-hour stores. Most of them after post-COVID are not 24-hour stores anymore, but they still open pretty early. So we like to get in, get our groceries, and get out roughly around the time the sun's going up. What do we have next? Mechanical concerns. So a lot of folks with buses are going to have drivetrains that most mechanics are unfamiliar with, and most people who work on their own cars are going to be unfamiliar with. You're going to have things like air brakes. You're going to have medium-duty truck engines like DT466s and Cummins 8.3s. That there isn't going to be that same level of familiarity and ease of access to both information and also experience working on them while you're on the road. So you have to be a little more kind of self-reliant on that aspect. You have to have the mindset of, if something goes wrong, I need to be able to fix it, or else I'm going to be at the mercy of relying on something like CoachNet or AAA, if they'll even help you on the AAA side. That's not a guarantee, or a service like that. The expenses that you can run into, you need to have those things in mind. Like a tire on a bus like Ryan's or mine, I don't know what your tires cost.
About 300.
If you need a tire on a bus and you need it now because you had a blowout, you're going to spend $500 or $600 getting that tire done. If you can spend a day finding a better deal, you might save $100 or maybe $200 on that, but it's still going to be a fairly costly thing just to be able to roll again. If you are ignoring your gauges and you have a failure, let's say you have an engine failure, these engines will cost you not $5,000, not $10,000, but potentially $15,000 to get a engine overhaul or replacement, depending on exactly what has happened to your motor. You need to really be paying attention to the mechanical side of your bus to avoid having those kinds of expenses, and you need to be a little bit prepared for if something comes up out of the blue that you, but you need to be able to manage it having happened.
Yeah. Preventative maintenance is, $1 spent in maintenance will save you $10 in repairs with these buses. So like Josh mentioned, read your gauges, learn how to read your gauges, learn what the acceptable limits are and stay within them. If you have the check engine light come on, don't put a piece of black tape over it. Actually find out why it's, I've seen that before, unfortunately. Oh, we don't know. The laughter in the crowd is good.
Live studio audience.
Live studio audience. So, but basically, maintaining your bus will save you an inordinate amount of money. Waiting for something to break down is never a good thing. And there are parts like school districts, if you're using a school bus, or transit authorities that have the coaches, they have a recommended maintenance schedule. Follow that maintenance schedule for your bus as well. And you can find them online. You can ask your local school district or where you bought the bus from, if you bought it from a school district, to have their maintenance schedule and follow that maintenance schedule. So oil changes, inspecting your brakes, inspecting your tires. Josh mentioned a blowout. We've had blowouts not caused by having too little air, too much air, or just improper maintenance of your tires. Maintain that and have a TPMS, know what your tire pressures are, know what your tire temperatures are. You're going to save potentially a lot of money.
Well, in the realm, like before I had my bus, I was not a wrench turner on vehicles. I never worked on my own car. I did brakes once. So I was a little bit intimidated getting into the large diesel equipment, but once you're part of the community, ask questions. People are so knowledgeable and willing to help share that knowledge. So now I feel confident in my preventative maintenance to know how to do it. And you save a lot of money doing it yourself as well.
Yeah. Definitely. You need to be able to, unless you're rich. If you're rich, you can pay somebody to do everything for you. If you're a normal person, you'll save. It'll cost you 3 times as much for someone else to change your oil. than it would to do it yourself. And that's not a trivial amount of money. On my bus, it costs about $100 for me to change my own oil, but it would cost me 300 or 350 to pay someone else to do it. And kind of piggyback on what Ivan was saying about the maintenance schedules. These platforms, particularly the engines, they have what's called a B10 and a B50 rating, which kind of estimates the expected lifespan of the engine during normal use. And that number depends on having fleet maintenance that's following the schedule that was set for it. So when you see someone talking about like forget all the jokers that will tell you about million-mile motors. When you see a Cummins 5.9 has a B50 of 350,000 miles, that is with fleet maintenance being done at the proper intervals, using the proper fluids, the proper replacement parts, etc. And you can plan to get somewhere around that number out of your engine. And the rest of the platform is the same way. It's dependent on having regular maintenance done at regular intervals.
Yeah, and the B50 means that 50% of the engines make it to that distance
without a major overhaul.
Yeah.
Or without a major service.
Yeah. So the people claiming million-mile motors,
Yeah. Stop listening. If someone says the words million mile, stop listening to them right away.
Yeah.
All right. My next one is the realities of driving a bus. That mostly comes down to the bus is big, the bus is slow. People don't respect that the bus is big and the bus is slow and the bus is heavy and may not stop on a dime like their little BMW as they pull in front of you and hit the brakes. You also have, just emphasizing the slow part, especially for my bus has a top speed of about 58 miles per hour. So you need to be keeping that in mind at all times when you're planning your route, which way you're going to go. We'll usually go down the slow lane of the highway most of the route that we're going, but Google would like for me to take these little roads that might be fine on a moped, but even like a regular pickup truck is going to have trouble with them. Or you're going to see a lot of downtown if you're using Google Maps and not validating the routes before you hit go. When you're in a bus, you hit the directions on Google Maps, you look at the route, you take some alternative options from the ones that might be faster if you're in a car, because you're just not.
Yeah.
In that same realm, if you use like Waze or something that does traffic diversion to try to save time, usually those shortcuts or time savers are those back little windy roads.
Yep.
So take that with caution.
Yeah, and like Josh mentioned, to me the most inconvenient part is the little car pulling in front of you and then brake checking you. They don't realize they're doing it. They're not doing it on purpose. But our stopping distance is not the same as the little Honda Civic that just brake checked you. But when they see the bumper coming up on them, they tend to let go of the brakes.
All right, so the next one on my list is vaguely the stigma associated with living in a bus. And so a lot of people you're going to run into, they hear you live in your bus and they're thinking you live in your car. And they're thinking that means you're homeless, that means you're poor, you're dirty, whatever. They don't necessarily notice you have a large living space with tons of solar panels on the roof, and you're telling Google or Alexa to turn your lights on and off in your air-conditioned space with your nice stove. And meanwhile, you're baking some bread and you're cooking some eggs or whatever you happen to be doing. You're working online, doing your job. Like you're living a pretty fancy overall lifestyle, potentially. Not everybody does, but the moment they see you're someone who lives full time in a bus, they're gonna have the idea in their head that may not match reality, and it might be overly negative.
I find a lot of that is from jealousy, because you talk to them and then eventually you'll get the I would love to do that, or I would have loved to do that. Just get out and do it. There's nothing wrong with living in a home with a rubber foundation. I always say that we are houseless. We're not homeless. We have a home. We just don't have a physical house. and our home is right behind us here, or right in front of us, or all around us here. At this gathering, we're at Schoolie Swarm. It's a great event that happens every February in Florida. There's upwards of 250 homes here.
You don't have anything to add to that one?
I mean, I put my whole life on social media, so people know what it's like for me to live in a bus.
Yeah.
So the next one on my list is the trade-offs with the size of your bus. I see a lot of people, and there are some people in the audience here who have short buses, and that can be fine, but there are trade-offs for that. A lot of us have full-size buses, and there are trade-offs with that. A full-size bus is big. It's not going to fit in any parking lot unless they have double parking spaces. And even then, you may end up going perpendicular and taking 14 parking spaces in order to fit that.
Slight exaggeration, just 5.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of folks will tow a car behind. How many parking spaces do you need?
7.
7 parking spaces. Yeah, it's a little smaller, but 7 is still quite a few parking spaces. But the ease of driving you get with a short bus, you have to weigh that against the amount of functionality and features that you can put into a bigger bus. Like, find people with 5-window buses. They're very common, 5-window buses. Ask them where they shower. And they're mostly going to tell you Planet Fitness. Find somebody with a 40-foot bus, ask them where they shower in our bus.
And there's someone in the crowd there. She actually has a bathtub. So, you know, in a 38-foot, I think yours, 36-foot
yeah.
bus. Yeah. So, and that inconvenience of size that Josh mentioned, smaller, yes, more convenient driving around, etc. But how much of your time do you spend driving? How much of your time do you spend living in it?
Right. My first bus that I had a 5-window bus, and it was 24 feet bumper to bumper, and we could fit in a single parking lot. I could go to Starbucks, and I could pull in between the BMW and the Volkswagen, and it was just fine. But when I woke up in the morning, I had to wait for my wife to wake up so that we could turn our bed into a sofa. If I needed to cook something, I had to assemble my kitchen. I had to take my kitchen out of storage and assemble it in order to be able to make some eggs that morning. And that was kind of and anything you wanted to do was generally stowed away and packed, or was otherwise being used for something. After moving to our current bus, which is 32 feet, our kitchen and living area is larger than the entire bus that we had with our short bus. We gained a shower, a bathroom, and a bedroom pretty much for free by going from 24 to 32 feet. Every foot can make a huge difference in how much you're able to put in there.
And if you have your mind set on that, you're like, oh, I want this size rig, but you haven't picked it yet, don't get locked into that. I was not planning on getting a 40-foot bus. It happened to be the right time, right place, right price. And having that extra space really gives you a lot of those creature comforts. So I've got residential appliances in my bus. Since I love to cook, that wouldn't be as feasible in a smaller rig because you have to be more cognizant of how much space you're taking up.
Another thing I would put out there, if you're considering a bus, find an event happening near you and look at people's bills. Most of these events, you're not going to get the full necessarily tiny house show, everything's put away and everything's beautiful tour, but most people will still let you eyeball what they have going on in their bus, what they were able to put together. You can get a better idea of what meets your lifestyle, what meets your goals. There's a lot of folks who end up with multiple iterations of, and I'm one of them, where I started with a short bus because it just seemed easier. I went to a bigger bus, saw all the benefits of that, and are currently building an even bigger bus with even more space and more benefits.
Yeah, the deciding Instagram because they're too short, the videos, but
And beware of fisheye lenses.
yeah.
Because buses are not 15 feet wide. They're 7.5 feet wide, every single bus. They're all that width.
Yeah. But like tiny home tours, and there's a bunch of different channels out there. Take a look, but also take the time to reach out to the people that have given the tour. So they always list their socials. Go there, figure out what they are, and contact them. And if there's something that you saw that you had a question or whatever, you can say that, you know, if we could ask them a couple questions, basically. Are they liking that? Have they upgraded since the last time a video was posted, et cetera, et cetera? Because a lot of people will say, oh, you know, during the home tour, they love their thing. And then 2 years later, it's like, oh, no, we're in a 45 foot now. So,
Yeah. And just to piggyback a little bit on that, when you're asking people about their bus, ask them about the things that didn't work.
yeah.
Don't ask them necessarily about. I mean, also ask them about the things that are working now, but ask them about the things they tried that didn't work, because not working enough to replace it with something else. That's a big flag.
And one of the number one questions I get asked is, what would you do differently? And you learn after being on the road things that logically you maybe don't make sense in the beginning. So like for my bus, one of the things is put your refrigerator on the driver's side, which may sound odd, but the driver's side of the bus usually has a smoother ride because it's not near the shoulder of the road. At least I've seen that as I've driven more miles. Is
Ask questions.
Yeah, questions. All right, what's next? So one thing that I personally, unfortunately, have more experience with is the difficulty of healthcare while you're on the road. Most healthcare plans are only going to be valid in the state where you got the plan. And my wife has had a couple issues over the years, and we have had to seek healthcare in a lot of states, including California, where you don't really want to pay those kinds of prices. And dealing with that, you need to be able to negotiate with healthcare providers. When you're seeking out healthcare, ask them about cash prices. Your insurance company will probably be no help despite you paying the premium about cash prices. Ask them about any available discounts. It's easier for them, and they end up ultimately making more from cash patients than they're going to make from people who are coming in with health insurance plans because they pay 15-20% or whatever the book rate is typically on a service. So you need to be able to do that negotiation as best as possible. Have a little bit of money set aside for those types of things, and just kind of understand that your normal healthcare package is probably not going to cover you while you're traveling.
I'm Canadian, so healthcare.
Yeah.
We have a different system.
Right.
But when we're traveling in the U.S., we have health insurance that is designed. It's called Blue Cross. We can go anywhere in the world. We're covered. Yes, there might be some out-of-pocket stuff and a bit of negotiation and maybe the odd little argument, but eventually you do get paid.
Yeah, and we have had some instances where cash prices were actually lower than copays for some services. So even if your health insurance is a plan that's going to cover you, ask that question anyway. You might still be saving money.
Yeah, I recently had a trip to the ER out of the state of my residency, so that was a fun ongoing insurance battle. So do as much as you can to stay healthy and not need those services, but also don't go unprotected in case of those emergency services are needed.
Right.
And you got to make it work.
Yep.
What do we have next? So this is kind of a broad topic, and that is being able to earn money on the road, including maintaining internet access. So this list I put together actually a couple of years ago. Some things have changed since then. I'm self-employed, so the general what I do for a living is pretty much taken care of. But how I'm able to do it largely around internet access over the last couple of years has changed quite a bit. When I started out, the easiest way to get internet access was actually to pull into Starbucks parking lot and tether my Wi-Fi off of there. and just use Wi-Fi from Starbucks, or now McDonald's has a lot of businesses. You can just pull in the parking lot and they've got a strong. Since then, we have tried several iterations cell phone based internet, either tethering directly to the phone, using SIM card and a router. Now they have things like 4G or 5G home internet routers that are done over the same network that are affordable. And now you have Starlink, which is kind of where everyone I think is going to end up who's doing RV life or bus life. But for a long time, that was a big question that I think is mostly solved if you're able to afford it. I would
Just
say
move over to get the people out of the rain.
if you're not sure about how you're going to earn money while you're on the road, like what you're going to be able to do for a job, I would suggest that you pause and figure that out before you go too far down that aisle. There's a lot of folks who they know they want to do the lifestyle and they buy the bus, they start converting the bus, they're getting ready to hit the road, but they work at Lowe's or something. They don't necessarily have a current job that's going to translate to something they can do while they're traveling. And I tell people, figure that out. Figure out how you're going to make money before you get on the road. Figure out where you're going to convert your bus before you buy your bus. That's another thing, but unrelated. But things that you should have figured out before you take that next step, and how you're going to generate revenue, how you're going to earn income while you're on the road. You need to have figured out before you're on the road.
And living on the road costs a lot less than people think, and a lot less than living in a house. We're sort of exited the rat race in the sense that we're not working to pay stuff that we're working for. It's a really different parameter. And a lot of us don't need to work full time. You find out that, hey, I don't need to make $100,000 a year to live, and actually put savings away for that matter. You can get by with a lot less. And some people will do a temporary job that can be, harvesting or, working at a UPS facility close to, or Amazon close to Christmas, or whenever they're, Black Friday.
Or building a Harbor Freight.
Yeah, or building Harbor Freights. Yeah. There's a lot of jobs that are open to nomads, even if you're not going online. There are a lot of things you can do that are temporary, seasonal, that you can store up enough money in 2 months to live on the road for 6 months, and then work for 2 months and be off for another 3 or 4 months. A lot of people do that in this community and are very happy doing it.
Yeah, and with the internet nowadays, it's so much easier if you are fluent with a computer and things like that. There's so many freelancing websites. You can do contract work online. And if you don't have your own internet solution, another great resource is public libraries. They're usually quiet. There's computers there if you don't have a laptop or something handy. It doesn't cost you anything to go spend your day there. But there's online jobs where you can make $20, $30, $40 an hour. So even if you go to the library for a couple hours a week, you start to build up that income stream, and you can really make it work from anywhere.
And while Ivan does correctly say that bus life doesn't necessarily cost more than regular home life, it can if you choose to make it cost that much.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely, you are in control of your expenses to a much greater degree than if you are living in a traditional stationary home, based on how much you're going to travel, based on what kind of events or things you're going to try and attend, things like that. It can be very inexpensive. It's not necessarily very inexpensive, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. Personally, my bus life has been substantially less expensive than traditional home life was before that. But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the case. You have to make that the case.
Yeah, and for me, I used to travel for work, which included planes, hotels, rental cars, the whole thing. I figured out, and through calculations, math, great thing, that any trip over 3 days was cheaper to take the bus than it was the plane, the hotel, all that. And I'm not eating in restaurants anymore, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
A lot of one of the up life is you're not going to restaurants as much.
Also, your through.
Yeah. No, ours definitely will not fit in a drive-through. So that little 5-window bus, you might be able to make
No,
it through.
small.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
You'll fit in a van.
Yeah.
You'll fit in some vans.
Yeah.
You might not fit in a high roof sprinter van, but
Yeah.
you'll fit in a small transit connector or something. Yeah. All right. The last one on my list is generally around power. Uh, Several of us here have largely overspec solar power systems on our buses and massive battery capacity to go along with it. And I am looking at this one right behind me, which has a huge solar and huge battery bank. But the information that's out there about solar, a lot of people who are new to it are going to be reading bad information, either intentionally or otherwise, bad information about how they're going to be able to live on the road without plugging in. And most of the things you're going to see are more marketing than anything about you can buy this little 400-watt solar panel kit and these little lead acid batteries, and you're going to be able to run everything you ever desired off of that. But the reality is, you'll never have enough power. You'll always have something else you want to plug into that you're not going to do because you know you don't have enough power to do it. Even when you have a huge solar array like this, you're always going to have situations where maybe it snows. You get zero solar power when it snows. Maybe it rains 3 days in a row. And even though you have a huge battery bank, that doesn't last you forever. You need to be able to make power. You need to have plenty of capacity to store it, and you need to be able to plan your usage around that. As your banks and your panel capacity gets bigger, that's less of an issue. But if you think you're going to be able to run your washer and your dryer and your refrigerator, your hair dryer, and your electric cooktop off your 400 watts of Amazon bought solar panels, you're wrong. That's not real. That's not how it works. Even most of us who have large solar power also have a generator. That generator is there for when it snows.
Yeah.
When it's raining and also hot. We're here in Florida. It can be 100 degrees and raining at the same time. You're getting no power, but you're using a lot of power running your air conditioner on top of your normal daily things that you want to run. The reality out there is you need to do the math. You need to figure out how much capacity you're actually going to get out of your batteries. Are you looking at batteries? Don't go by the label on lead acid batteries because they're lying to you. They don't have that capacity in actual usage. Don't fall for the live AGM batteries. If you're thinking about building a solar system, go directly to lithium. Do not pass go, or you're going to waste all that money that you put in before going to lithium is literally just going to be lead.
Yeah.
And when you're planning a solar system, the thing to remember is plan for the winter months because your days are much shorter. So your potential production is going to be less that time of year. When I started bus life, it was May and going into the summer. So I initially was like, oh, I've got plenty of power. My batteries are always full. This is great. And then it hit November and December. And I was like, oh, I actually don't have enough capacity because I didn't take into consideration, even though I'm down south, those days are shorter. I'm not producing enough power. And I have expanded my system like 2.5 times now.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into planning how much power, particularly on the panel side, you need. You need to keep in mind that if you have a 400-watt solar panel, that is its maximum generation that it can do. That is a rare occurrence that you're going to be hitting whatever that number is for that panel. Most of the day, you're going to be hitting maybe half of that number.
Yeah. The solar panels, the rating on it is at the equator, June 21st, noon, and it's only 70 degrees.
Yeah, definitely like the time of year is going to matter because the angle of the sun, if it's directly overhead, you're going to get great power. If it's way over there, you're not going to be getting great power. You need to be planning for when it's way over there. You need to realize that in the mornings, like the over the horizon, you're getting this much solar power. At night, you're getting this much solar power. You get maybe the day where you're going to be getting. So I definitely have run into a lot of folks who very unrealistic expectations about what they're able to do with their solar power, and I think it is coming down to the marketing that solar panel and battery storage companies have put out there.
Yeah, and most of the people that have unrealistic expectations were sold those unrealistic expectations. Solar panels are cheap. Cover your roof in solar panels.
Yeah.
Solar panels, and they provide shade.
Yeah, they count as shade. You want the shaded roof. So shade your whole roof with solar panels. And get the biggest panels you can get. So that covers the things on my list. Do you want to talk about some of the ones that are on your list?
Yeah, so about half of my list is stuff that overlaps with Josh. So one of the things that's different about kind of the group of us sitting up here is I'm a solo traveler. Well, both of them have loving wives. So as a solo traveler, like it's always great to come to these events. You get to hang out with a lot of people. But the reality is that when you're solo on the road, it can get lonely at times. So that's something to think about ahead of time too, going into this lifestyle is, are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? What kind of people do you thrive around? I very much am an extrovert, so I enjoy being surrounded by people. But there's times where if I'm out solo doing my stuff, it may be days where I haven't talked to another person face to face. So that's kind of one of the things on my list is it can get lonely as a solo traveler.
Yeah, that's something where I don't have that level of loneliness, but we have for sure been places where we haven't seen another person, like my wife and I. We haven't seen an additional person potentially for weeks at a time if we're out literally in the middle of nowhere, which like we're equipped for that functionally. We've got plenty of water storage, we've got plenty of power, we've got plenty of room for 2 people worth of food. Like we're good, but it's just us. So we interact with people online, obviously, all the time. We're active in a lot of communities, a lot of different groups. So that helps, but there's no real replacement for literally sitting next to somebody and having a conversation with them. So that's something for sure to keep in mind.
For us, we travel to meet people. We don't travel to go to places. So we don't have that too much. And the longest we stay put in one place is when we come to Schoolies Forum, and that's 10 days a year.
So let's see. We've already talked about power. That was on my list as well. So one of the things that you got to consider, Josh just mentions he has room for food storage, but when you compare it to a residential setup, you are much more limited on fridge space, freezer space, and just general pantry space. And as somebody who loves to cook, that's why my kitchen takes up a third of my living space, because I wanted to try to get as close to the residential storage experience, but having enough way to store what you want in large quantities can definitely be difficult in smaller rigs.
But we have the advantage of we pull up to the grocery store, we can load right into our fridge immediately. We don't have to put it in the car, bring it home, and then unload the car. So that's a nice aspect. But yeah, having that additional food storage is nice. When we had a Sticks and Bricks house, we had the big freezer, the big fridge, all that. We have a rather large fridge, but we don't have the freezer space, and that's something we're missing a little of.
Yeah. I would add to that, the size of your refrigerator is probably going to be related to the size of your rig. If you have a van, you have a 5-wheel bus, 4-window, maybe even 6-window bus, you're probably going to have a refrigerator that's yay tall. How big's your fridge? 65
liters.
Okay.
Yeah, so about 3 cubic feet.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's this wide and this tall, give or take. Yeah. We have a 12.5 cubic foot refrigerator in our bus, and we previously had like a 7.5, and we've upgraded like 5 times to get to where we are now. But we're at the point where we have good enough freezer storage. We can buy meat in larger quantities and section it off and stow it, and we have a place where we can buy vegetables and fruits or vegetables that need to be refrigerated and put them in. We're finally at the point where we can go a solid week without needing to go to a grocery store without skipping any meals. But definitely that is one of the friendly enough on the road as far as how much power it uses, how much space it takes, how durable it's going to be in a moving vehicle that's always shaking. Like house refrigerators don't like to be in an earthquake all day long, and that's essentially what they're getting in a bus.
So for us, when we had a compressor style refrigerator, right now we have an inverter style, but the compressor style refrigerator, we had a switch that when we're traveling, we'd turn it off. That way the compressor isn't trying to start against the vibration or you'd hit a bump, because we actually locked up 2 fridge compressors while traveling before learning that little trick of put a switch on it. It's going to stay cold for 8 hours anyways.
Yeah, we have a RV refrigerator, so it's definitely ready for travel. And you have 3 refrigerators and 2 freezers.
Yeah.
So yeah, even though I talk about not having enough space, I do have a decent amount. So my regular one, I think, is 10.5 cubic foot, which is from Home Depot. It's what a lot of people get. I've got a small 12-volt chest freezer under my couch. And most recently, I added a 79-liter fridge freezer combo under my bed.
What else you got?
So one of the downsides can be the cost of furnishing bigger rigs. Well, sometimes it's cheaper to buy a larger vehicle outright. You have more surface area and interior area. So factoring that into your build budget and realizing, yes, it's still cheaper than building a house or probably what your rent will be for the next year or two. But consider that when you're thinking about size, 40 foot, decent amount of area. You pay by the kind of the board foot for insulation. So spray foam, it's going to cost you more in a big rig, things like that. So for me, that was one of the downsides, was the extra cost for how big the bus was in the build out.
You don't have to fill your bus. You can actually leave open space too.
I don't know what you're talking about, Ivan.
Yeah.
But definitely going to be more expensive. Don't think that insulation is going to cost more than a 40-footer. Don't. You're going to want that insulation, or you're not going to want to be in your bus most of the year. Most places are not where you can just roll up and open your windows and it's just beautiful and you're going to be fine sleeping without doing your own heating and doing your own cooling. And the insulation is what's going to make that reasonable. You'll see people who will have a huge wood stove in their bus, and they're just fine in cold weather because they just completely overpower the cold with that fuel. But most of the time, you're going to be somewhere where a diesel heater is going to be the appropriate option. It's going to be the convenient option, and if you have insulation, it's going to work. A single air conditioner might be able to keep an entire 40-foot bus cold in summer, as long as you have the insulation. If you don't have the insulation, 100% it's not going to work.
So those were probably the 3 biggest items on my list that differed from yours.
You had one on there that you mentioned to me yesterday. You took it off your list about being single on the road.
We already
Well, that fell into like it can be lonely as a solo travel.
Well, I think that's worth. I think that's worth 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Of, like,
Oh,
this
okay.
is something that affects him that doesn't affect us because we're both in long established relationships.
So one of the other items on my list is that it is nearly impossible to date while traveling full time, because you're typically on the go. It's not like you're going to go put in a lease for a year somewhere and get those habits where you may run into somebody in real life and form those connections. So being on the move does make it difficult to find somebody unless they're also living nomadically or have their own rig and things like that. So it's definitely not something that was at like the front of my mind when I moved into my bus. But as I'm starting to get a little bit older, I'm like, okay, so what's next?
Yeah. And dating apps are not what they
No,
Dating apps are trash.
they really are.
And one thing I would add on there that I'm assuming is the case, I can't say for sure, but I'm assuming is the case, is this lifestyle isn't necessarily an easy sell to a potential dating partner. Hi, my name's Ryan. I live in a bus. I'm only here for a week, but I'm going a bunch of other places, and maybe if you're cool, you can go too.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're gonna get a lot of takers on that greeting.
No, and on the other side, if you're both already nomads, whose vehicle are we going to keep?
Right.
We're both keeping our own, so we have our private spaces
Okay.
for when we want that.
But I've seen a lot of relationships that began in the community, and that was definitely a real question. Is
Yeah.
what do? We have two buses. What happens if you downsize to one bus and then the relationship doesn't work out? That can be a big mess. What happens with? Are you towing a car? Maybe you need to be towing the other person's rig instead of towing a car. There's some concerns there.
So if you're in a bus, find someone that's living in a van because your bus can tow the van.
Right.
Or vice versa. If you're living in a van, find someone that has a bus big enough to tow your van. But that way you can both keep your spaces. My list was very short because I read theirs first and they basically covered everything. The one thing that for me on my list is, and this is a question a lot of people, or this is a realization that a lot of people come to, is why didn't we start doing this sooner? And a lot of people, it's out of fear that they're not doing this sooner. A lot of people, it's out of the fear of the unknown. There's a lot of resources online. Some of the schoolie groups on Facebook are full of great information. Some of them are full of idiots. So I think commonly we can suggest the Schoolie Swarm group is one where if you're an idiot, you won't be in the group very long. You'll get taken out of the group unceremoniously and we'll never see you again. And that is a good way of dealing with it. So the moderators of the group are doing a good thing. The whole idea of the Schoolie Swarm Facebook group is that eventually you are going to be face to face with the person that is there. It's not full of keyboard warriors. There's other groups where you can ask a question like, hey, how do I put a doorbell on my bus? And in the Schoolie Swarm group, you'll get answers, maybe a video showing how they did it and explaining what doorbell they used, et cetera, et cetera. On other groups, you'll get, if you don't know how to do that, you shouldn't be having a bus. So that's an unfortunate part of this community is there are people, and a lot of those keyboard warriors have never even owned a bus. Yeah. So there's a lot of great resources out there. Find the ones that are supportive. Find the ones that actually want you to succeed, not the ones that are laden in jealousy and anger.
No, absolutely. I'm in quite a few schoolie groups, and the only one that I actually click on the group name to participate in is the Schoolie Swarm. I'll see posts from other ones. I'll jump in and answer questions when I can. Mostly in those other groups, I tend to be pointing out when someone has given someone bad advice.
The Million Mile Motor.
Right, the Million Mile Motor. That's like it's a trigger word.
It's got an Allison transmission.
Right, it has an Allison transmission.
They're not all good.
Right, Allison's a brand. It's not a model.
Yeah.
They make a lot of different things. The Schoolie Swarm group, rule number one is be nice. None of the other groups have that. The Schoolie Swarm means it. The goal is definitely you're gonna meet people on the Facebook group with the goal of eventually, or the expectation of eventually meeting them in real life, and that does change the type of interaction you have with people. Do you have anything else? Have we covered our list?
I think I'm good.
That's pretty
mine
much it,
so
yeah.
far, yeah.
All right. Well, definitely any questions that you guys might have, anything that might be a concern for you, definitely drop it in the comments. You can always come to the Schoolie Swim group on Facebook and post your questions there too, because we're all active there.
Yeah.
As well as a bunch of other people. So don't be afraid to join and jump in there. You guys already know I am the Wander Lounge channel. So that's where we're broadcasting. Ivan LaCroix here with the LaCroix Cruiser, and we have Ryan with the Seeking Discovery. We're going to have links to both of those channels in the description. Does anyone in our studio audience have any questions or concerns they would like to bring up?
I have a question or
Yes.
I'd like to make.
Speak up louder.
Yeah, hi. You guys elaborated a little bit in the conversation here today about the stigma associated with being in a bus or a schooling type vehicle. How do you find when you guys are getting some apprehension from some of the RV parks? Like, let's say you want to go to an RV site.
I have a great answer for that. So
That's butting up the heads with that.
yeah, so the question is related to the stigma of being in a bus. And one thing that you're going to hear commonly, and it's semi-accurate, is if you go to an RV park, they might not let you in, first off. If they do let you in, you might have some snooty RVers next to you who are going to turn their noses up at you and they're going to look down on you. My solution to that is don't go there. Why have you built your bus to require being in a $50, $75, $100 a night RV slot? If you find yourself there, in my opinion, you've made a mistake. If you can't avoid it, you are going to run into those people. And that's a problem with those people. There are judgmental people out there. There are people out there who have misconceptions. The best thing you can do is engage with them if they're willing. Talk to them. They'll see you're a normal enough person, hopefully. And once somebody talks to you for 10 or 15 minutes after you walk out of your bus, like they're going to stop thinking there's that weirdo that lives in a bus, and they're going to think here's this guy who I've met or this gal who I've met that I've been having a nice conversation with. One thing you will find, and it's not just schoolie people, it's going to be people in RVs too. Once you start talking about your rigs, they stop caring about what your rig is. Everybody's interested in talking about their rig.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what their rig is. You have that conversation for a few minutes, and that negative part's going to go away.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily going to get through the gate.
No.
That's the reality. And my plan was, don't ever need to go through that gate. Don't need to spend that money. I saw a video, a full-length movie on YouTube recently of a couple who built a bus and then went around and did like a year on the road. And I am tempted to start recommending it as here's a video you can watch to see what not to do if you're doing a school. Because one of the things they did is they stayed in RV parks and paid parking spots every day for a year. Right, like we're talking
That's
about
expensive.
right, and these things average, you know, at state parks, especially like the higher end state parks, you might be paying $100 a night for a parking space where there's a rig here and a rig here, and you're wedged in between. So my suggestion is avoid doing it if you can. If you're in a situation where you can't avoid it for whatever that reason might be, if somebody's giving you the eye, go up to them and say hi. See where it goes from there.
Yeah. We've reluctantly stayed in RV parks a couple times in the last 7 years, and it's never been a bad experience, but it's never been a good experience. You know, even though our bus is big and it's nice and it's clean and all that, we still get looked down upon by the person that just paid $500,000 to have an RV. We were at a van event recently where we got looked down upon by people in vans because their vans started at $200,000 when they bought them from the factory. We don't have $100,000 invested in this. So it's definitely, there are those stigmas out there, and ignore them. It's your home. Live in your home, enjoy your home. And if you don't like the neighborhood, change, move.
Yeah, they've got wheels. They
Yeah.
don't roll.
And also, too, I don't want to.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But also, too, I know I've had a couple of friends say to me, well, how much money you have in your bill? And it's about 35,000 for sake of discussion, which isn't enormous.
Yeah.
I said, well, why don't you just buy a used RV? And I said, well, what kind of used RV are you going to get quality wise for $35,000?
Yeah.
So you can buy a used one. I said, yeah, the one that's 10 years old,
Right.
that has the particle board walls and starting to fall apart.
Right.
So it's all relative. And I said, plus, when you look at the foundation of a bus or a Sprinter van or a motor coach like Ivan has, you're talking about something that's solid. The foundation is solid. It's a solid vehicle.
Yeah.
So when you build it and you build it right and you put some wood in there, whatever it is you put in it, it's going to last you 20 years if you take care of what's in there. So I think the quality of the build per cost
Yeah.
is much better than buying a used RV, unless you want to spend $100,000 for a used one like you guys are talking about and up.
Yeah.
Right.
Eventually from there. So,
And not only that, the buses are built to our specifications.
Mhm.
We have what we want in our buses.
Right.
My bus is completely different than Ryan's, and it's completely different than Josh's. I'm very happy in my bus. He's very happy in his bus, and he's very happy in his bus. If they were in my bus, they might not be happy. If I were in their bus, I might not be happy. But we built it to our specifications, to our needs. And there's no factory RV out there that can equal that sensation. And factory RVs and solar, they'll sell you the solar upgrade package. You get 200 watts of solar
Right.
and one lithium iron phosphate battery that will last your toaster maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's one thing on that note with the commercially produced RVs. The goal for commercial RVs is to last about 10 years, doing three weekends and 2 long weeks a year. And that's all the use they expect you to get out of it. And they build it to meet that expected use. If you look at a 10-year-old RV, there's going to be soft spots in the floor. There's going to be soft spots in the roof. It's going to have water damage. There's going to be, someone will have used a can of great stuff on
Somewhere.
that RV
Yeah.
somewhere. If most of them, they're going to have, we're not talking about coach size. We're talking about normal, built on van platforms most of the time. They're going to have a rod knocking in the engine because they use a motor that they also use in a pickup truck or that they also use in a station wagon. There's going to be problems, and they just don't last. They're not intended to last at that point. They want you to get your 10 years, and then they want you to buy a new one. And RV parks who won't let a schoolie in tend to not let in a 10-year-old RV either. There is a 10-year rule that a lot of these parks will have. So you could have the nicest 15-year-old RV in the world, and they will turn you away.
Anybody else?
Anybody else who hates bus life?
Not going to find anyone here.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's gonna wrap this one up. Definitely check out Ivan's channel, check out Ryan's channel, and we will see you soon with, we're gonna do 2 or 3 more of these while we're visiting it. So we'll see you back on this channel in another day or 2.
Enjoy. Thank you, everyone.
I'll be here all week.